Hello everyone, Rico Baird, Realtor with Bridgewell Real Estate Group, and today I am going to be talking about something that I'm so passionate about and I think that everybody should be aware of and know of straight from the start if you're thinking about purchasing, and it's costs to purchase a home. I'm a big advocate of getting a pre-approval done in advance and knowing exactly what the affordability is that you're working with, but also what your monthly mortgage payments are going to be like so that you know what you can comfortably afford as well. But another subset to that is just understanding what costs come with home ownership, what costs you can expect, understanding taxes, how property tax adjustments work, maintenance fee adjustments, if you're purchasing a strata property, what costs are going to happen during the subject removal period. So really just the process as a whole. So that's what I'm going to be breaking down for you guys today. If you haven't been to my channel already, welcome to the Bridgewell Real Estate Group YouTube channel. And if you are already subscribed, then thank you for coming back and watching these videos. I essentially provide educational material about the real estate industry, important things that buyers and sellers should know. So like or comment if you have any things that you want me to talk about in the future, or you have questions about this video and costs of buying specifically. Subscribe if you haven't already, and if you are interested in purchasing a property right now in the Lower Mainland, that's really the area that I work in. So I have offices in Vancouver and Coquitlam, and I would be more than happy to walk you through this whole process and make it super straightforward and easy from the start. These are really the main costs that you should be aware of. There might be some that are, specific to you and your situation, but these are the big ones, and we're pretty much going to cover the bulk of what you should be aware of. So breaking it down, we have the subject removal period costs, and then we have the completion costs, are also known as the closing costs. So the subject removal period is the time that the buyer has to do their due diligence on the property. So that's where you have, subject to financing, subject to inspection, those kind of things. And then given that everything is okay with subject removal and you're satisfied with your findings, documentation, and you're able to obtain financing, then you would be like, okay, I'm good, I want to purchase this property, and I am proceeding to hand in my deposit. And then what happens is you have a negotiated completion day that is, weeks or months out, and you meet with your lawyer or your notary usually about 1 to 2 days prior to completion, and then that's when these closing costs would be due. So starting with the subject removal costs, we have the inspection. So an inspection is a really standard subject that a lot of people have in there. It's where you have a third-party inspector come through and essentially inspect the state of the property, make sure that you are aware of any repairs that need to be done, damage. It's really, really helpful. And I would highly recommend it for anybody that's purchasing a property, because it will also help to give you an idea of what maintenance you should be aware of down the road. So it's a really key part of purchasing a home. The inspection really depends on, the inspection amount, the cost of it depends on how big the property is, and essentially how many bedrooms and bathrooms and kitchens and things like that there are. The more there is to inspect, the more it's going to cost. So for example, a condo in the area around here is typically around $400. I've seen like $350, and I've seen up to about $450. Again, it kind of depends on bedrooms, bathrooms, kitchens, things like that. If you're in the townhouse, you're kind of in this like $475 to maybe $600 range. And if you're purchasing a detached home, a lot of the times I see between $500 and $800. But again, like a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom condo is going to be a very different price than a 6-bedroom, 3-bathroom detached home with a suite. So definitely just, think about the type of property that you're purchasing, talk to your realtor. They'll probably have a pretty good idea as to what you can expect for an inspection. The next is the appraisal. So an appraisal is not always going to be a cost that's covered by the buyer. Ask your mortgage broker in advance whether or not you should expect to have that cost. Most of the time they're in the range of $300 to $400. A really common amount that I see right now is $350 plus GST. And an appraisal is essentially an appraisal is hired by, or an appraiser, is hired by the lender, and their job is to justify the amount of the purchase price that you are spending, because they are lending you that money. So they have somebody that comes through that does an appraisal and basically just says, yes, this property is worth this amount of money, or no, this property is not worth this amount of money and we're not going to lend on it up to the amount that you've agreed to. So this is typically a part of the financing clause, and you should just ask your mortgage broker whether or not it's going to be applicable to you. Next is insurance. So I'm talking about home insurance in this particular situation. So this has become a really big hot topic for strata properties specifically, where we're having issues with buildings getting insured or insurance premiums increasing, deductibles increasing. This is a really common subject that's included on the original contract of purchase and sale right now. So during the subject removal period, you want to make sure that you are able to get insurance on the property that you are purchasing. And that you also have a very good idea of how much your insurance is going to cost based on, this premium spike and whatever deductibles there are if it's a strata property. Usually the insurance is required by the lenders. So if you are purchasing a property via financing from a mortgage versus cash, you are likely going to be required to obtain home insurance. So it's just good to know upfront that you can get it and exactly how much it's going to cost, because that is an annual cost that you should be aware of, because everybody should know what it costs to be a homeowner and what you can expect on an annual basis. So those are really the big ones during the subject removal period. And then what would happen is, as I said, if you're satisfied with everything, you would proceed to handing in the deposit. So the deposit is typically 5% of the purchase price. It will be an amount that is agreed to on the original contract of purchase and sale, so just check that. But what I would say is the expectation of most people in the Lower Mainland is about 5%. So the deposit forms a part of the down payment, and that's why I have this arrow here. So what that really means is that, let's say you intend to put down 20%, and that's going to be the amount that you put down to help fund your purchase. The deposit is going to be 5%. So that means that the remaining down payment funds are 15%. So the 5% deposit at subject removal, and then the remaining 15% down is going to equal a total amount contributed by you to 20%. So whatever that amount is that you were planning on putting down, the remaining amount would be due at the completion date. So moving on to the completion period, that's the remaining down payment that would be due. Additional closing costs that you can consider are going to be legal fees. So every single buyer or seller is going to need legal representation for their purchase or their sale. Typically on the purchasing side, the legal fees range from about $1,000 to $1,500. Does really depend on the area that you or that your notary or lawyer occupies, and also just additional disbursements, things like that. But for the most part, you're looking at about $1,100 to $1,500 for legal fees. Any adjustments, so this is something that the lawyer and the notary will be doing. So things like property tax adjustments, utilities adjustments, maintenance fees adjustments, it's all calculated based on the property that you're purchasing and also when you are moving in and what your adjustment date is. So take the example of property taxes that are due on the 1st of July or July 2nd. In that situation there, it really depends on when you move in, whether or not you're going to have to credit the seller that money or whether the seller is going to have to credit you that money. If the property taxes haven't been paid yet, then what is going to happen is, let's say that you are moving in March. That means you are going to have to pay the property taxes in July. So the seller has to credit you for the amount of time that they've lived in the home, January, February, up until whatever your adjustment day is in March. Now, if you were moving in September, the property taxes would have already been paid. So in that situation, you would have to credit the seller from the amount of time that you move in September for October, November, and December. So this adjustments, or these adjustments that are going to be factored into the closing costs really just depend on when you are moving in and whether or not those adjustments have been paid for by the seller or they haven't been paid for by the seller yet. So that's the adjustments kind of closing cost section that you should be aware of. Next is taxes. I do have quite a few videos on this, so property transfer tax and GST are really the big ones that you want to be aware of. I'm not going to get into it too much today, but I will leave a link down in the description for these two videos to give you ideas on how to calculate them and also exemptions for them as well. So the property transfer tax is based on the purchase price, so it's a calculation that's 1% on the first $200K, 2% on the balance up to the $2 million mark, 3% up to the $3 million mark, and then an additional 2% above the $3 million mark. So there are property transfer tax exemptions, for example, for first-time homebuyers and newly built homes, but it's up until a certain purchase price. So for example, first-time homebuyers up to $500K, newly built homes is up to $750K. And then there's also additional things that you need to qualify for, like the property itself needs to qualify, you need to qualify. So make sure that you look into those exemptions in a little bit more detail to get an understanding. But for an example on how much PTT would cost, on a $500,000 property transfer tax is looking at $8,000. So it's a good chunk of change. And keep in mind that if you are a foreign buyer or deemed a foreign entity, that you also have to pay an additional 20% property transfer tax on top of the property transfer tax that already stands. Now for GST is typically only relevant for newly built homes, like pre-sales. If you're purchasing a property that's a resale property, you're likely not going to have to pay that GST, but it's important to look into it, just be aware of it. It is 5% on the purchase price, and so, you know, if you are purchasing a pre-sale or a newly built home, in most situations, this is going to be applicable to you. There are GST rebates, so look into that as well. And again, if you guys have any questions, just give me a shout. Next is strata properties. If you have a property that you are purchasing that is strata, so condos, townhouses, things like that, the lawyer as a notary is going to be required to order certain documents related to the strata, like the insurance binder and the Form B. That's going to cost money, and usually, you know, you're looking at a couple $100 added on to your lawyer fees. There may also be a move-in fee. This is something that we would verify during the subject removal period. It's going to be in the bylaws section of the strata documents. So during the subject removal period, we always have a subject to strata documents. We check the bylaw, and usually in there we will be able to figure out how much the move-in fee is. A lot of the times it ranges from about $100 to $200. I've seen up to about $350, and I've also seen no move-in fee. So this is something that we would figure out during the subject removal period, and that pretty much rounds out a lot of the major costs that you need to be aware of. Again, you know, there are additional things that I haven't gone into too much depth here, like CMHC, mortgage insurance, you know, property surveys, things like that. But if you do have additional questions on those and you did want me to give you an idea of what your closing costs would look like, then I can definitely help you with that, or refer you to a notary or a lawyer that would be able to help you with that as well. Again, if you're kind of early on in your purchasing journey, I guess you could say, feel free to give me a shout. I am a realtor that works in the Lower Mainland, mainly in like the Vancouver and surrounding areas, and Coquitlam and surrounding areas, as well as the Fraser Valley. And I would be more than happy to help you purchase a home and also help you estimate all of these closing costs and help you get a move on with affordability and just finding the right place. So give me a shout if you guys have any questions. I hope that you like this video. If you want to see more videos like this, definitely subscribe. And if you have any recommendations for other videos that you want me to cover, then just leave a comment down below and I will add it to my list of videos that I want to do for you. So have a great day, guys, and I hope that this was helpful.